Cool. So I'll hold it. You try to describe it without saying the words. Okay. And we'll go from there.
Oh, so this is a tiny thing on a dog and it jumps and it bites?
Fleas?
Yes. This is a snake that doesn't have venom and it kind of like big hug.
Boa constrictor?
Yes. All right, this is a dog. It's super fluffy, curly hair.
Poodle.
And, yes. Vigilante.
Batman.
Yes. All right, tiny.
Ant or spider?
Cheese.
Oh, mouse.
Yes. So there's the tick and his sidekick. Kind of flappy, quiet. Oh, always attracted to flame. Flies into flame, like a attracted to anyway. Quiet. Okay. Oh, this is like a spider with a tail that bites, but it's not actually a spider. It's a
scorpion.
Yes. Okay.
Nice. What was that other one?
It was moth.
I was like, man, I haven't watched The Tick in forever. I'm bringing it back too. Right.
I thought we might be a tick watcher. Yes, okay.
Cool. I got 5, so we'll have you go. Same thing.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Real slow. If you put salt on them.
Oh, put salt on a slug. Snail.
Yes.
Okay.
No, slug. Down. They march.
Penguin?
Yeah. It's a type of spider with red.
With red?
Red markings on the back. In
like
Australia.
Tarantula? No.
They're like the deadly ones.
Oh, Black Widow?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. How do I describe this? It's like a lizard, I guess.
Gecko?
Just
salamander?
Yes. They love eating carrots. What's up?
Bunny? Rabbit.
Yeah.
Okay.
The moth's partner.
Tick!
Yeah. That worked out perfect.
That was great.
Oh man. I think they spit?
Do they spit?
Yeah.
Like a frog? No.
Spit
like
I believe it was llamas.
Okay.
There was something that said alpaca. I wasn't sure if that was the
an
same
alpaca.
kind of...
Oh yeah, llamas spit.
I don't know.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Nice. We'll go last round and we'll switch every other one.
Okay. Okay, countdown. So they're kind of like a sheep, but not, and they eat everything. They eat cans and Billy.
Go.
Yes. So there's a pack of them out there.
Wolves.
Yes.
Okay,
all right.
I forgot to switch off. A lot of people get these as pets in a tank.
Fish.
What kind?
What?
What kind?
Goldfish.
Yes.
Okay. Stole my baby like a dog in Australia.
The dingo.
Yes.
Every day, Bill Murray repeats this day.
A groundhog.
Yes.
It's a fish that we most often encounter in a can.
Tuna.
Yeah. No.
Salmon.
No. It's like all packed together like a can of. Yes.
Alvin is one of these.
Chipmunk.
Yes.
They eat all the wood in your house.
Termites.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
That was good.
How did that feel as a little warm up?
That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will introduce everyone to our guest today, Cianna. Is that how you say it?
Cianna, yeah.
Cianna is anyone watching on the video, the author of the book No Complaints, How to Stop Sabotaging Your Own Joy. So when she reached out, I was excited about this because anyone who's been listening knows we're all about closing that mind-action gap. And one of the big things that I referred to it as trying to figure out what stalls people from having an idea to actually execution. And what's great about this book is one of the biggest things I feel like happens to people is they complain. Mm-hmm. They think of all the reasons not to do something or to hold themselves back. So I guess you could start giving a little background about yourself, how you came about this book and complaints specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not set out to be an author. I was the short version of the longer story is that 10 years ago I went through a horrible breakup and got really depressed and ended up losing a lot of stuff. In the meantime, thank you. Yeah, okay. That's cool. Then I got my life back together, sort of fast forward several months later, and I have friends who are, helping me out, and I got a job again, and I was kind of like getting myself back on my feet. And I was replaying a conversation from the night before with some of my friends as I was driving along, and realized that they were trying to say something nice to me, and my life was actually going pretty well. Okay. But I kept complaining about that breakup.
I know that feeling.
Yeah? We've all been there. And it was like, no matter what they said, the specific incident was I had cooked dinner for them at their house, and they were like, oh, thank you, dinner was really great. And I was like, yeah, I used to have such a great kitchen, and I lost all of that stuff. And, and I was like, how ungrateful am I?
What made you go that route instead of oh, thank you guys so much? Did you feel like what you made wasn't up to your standards or something? Or?
That's a good question. I think that I just, I have a hard time accepting compliments. And so one of my automatic defenses is to start to, oh yeah, but it's not really that great. And then I just kind of, and my go-to at the time was because of that relationship, everything's bad,
I had that. I think I read a behavior economics study on that or something where it was on confidence, and, because I'm the same way, people who you give a compliment, they're like, oh, not oh, you did so great on that. No, I just lucked out.
Right.
People are actually, you kind of think you're doing it to be modest, but people are actually turned off by it.
Yeah.
Because it shows you have the confidence to just accept a compliment. So people are like, all right, I guess this person doesn't want me to cheer them on.
Absolutely. I have a whole thing, a taxonomy of complaints in here, and one of them is complaining to deflect compliments, because certainly from that. And the image that I have in my head is I think that when I'm giving somebody a compliment, I'm usually giving them a gift of some kind. I'm trying to thank them for what they just gave me. So to me now, when somebody's offering me a compliment, I kind of picture them offering this gift. And when you complain, as a result, you're just kind of smacking their hand away.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
it's just...
And it turns them off.
And it turns them off. And it's like, oh, well, I have a one-sided exchange then. They tried to do something. I said, no, not listening to you.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, actually. It feels really bad to the person who's trying to, give a compliment. So now I'm like, okay, great. That was part of the lesson.
And it's hard to just be like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all you have to say.
That's all I have to say. Yeah. Thank you so much. And then maybe they feel heard, which is also great. Because then, you're connected for a moment.
In improv, they call that yes and. One of the first things you're taught, level 1, is whenever you're doing a scene with a partner, you have to yes and whatever they're doing. Now, on the higher levels, you'll see them negate it and whatever. But when you're learning, it doesn't help, because if we're in a scene, we got to make everything up. So if I'm like, oh man, it's so cold up in these mountains, and you're like, no, we're in my house. That leaves us literally
now what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right.
And it just discourages both people. Whereas if you were like, yes, and I can't believe I packed all this emergency gear. Now it's like, all right, we're building on that. So that's really cool.
Well, I try to practice a lot of yes and in my life, actually, because I think a lot of times people are doing that. They're saying, oh, I would like to connect with you. And you say, yes, and I would like to connect with you, is basically the conversation. Or, nah. No, not interested.
Yeah, absolutely. What have you found? Is there this is the biggest complaint you've noticed among all kinds of complaints?
The one that seems the hardest to get over for a lot of people is the inner critic. And that's the last one for me, and it's ongoing. And I've started to understand the inner critic as complaining to me about me and kind of going nowhere. So my specific definition of complaining, which is what I'm targeting in this book, and I think it's a little different than what you see in the dictionary, is that complaining is expressing dissatisfaction without contributing to solving the problem. And it's that second part that makes it a problem. And it's when we say, oh, somebody's such a complainer, that's what we mean, that they're just constantly griping and they're not actually solving anything. And it's exhausting after a while to listen to them. So that's the idea, is you have to be contributing to solving the problem. Now, if I take that internal critic and all I'm doing is beating myself up, same thing, not actually helping.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a really common one for me.
That makes me think of two big things. The first one is you were talking about not solving the problem, and my friend, like, I guess it was like right time. You know, these days everyone's commenting and trolling on Facebook or YouTube, and it's like along those lines. People love to, whether they're a YouTube star or just someone commenting on a video, people, for whatever reason, instead of just being grateful for whatever that person's doing, for at least trying, they love to say, oh, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right.
Right.
But they're not providing a solution. And I used to do that when I was younger. And it wasn't until my friend, like, pretty much put that in, like, nice, concise words. I wish I remembered the exact wording, but he was basically like, if all you're going to do is complain, but you're not going to give me a solution, you're, like, what you're saying is useless, because you're just, like, adding to the problem. And I was like, oh, that is so true.
Right.
Like, that's, like, I felt embarrassed for myself, because I'm not contributing anything. It's fine to criticize if you can say, oh, here's a way to make it better. And that's where I was like, all right, I got to rethink that big time. And then the other thing was, you were talking about that self-critic. Huge. Someone else was telling me how if I had the person in my head, like, as another person, I would not be friends with that person. They're the worst. Like, could you imagine your critic version just being out there talking to your friends? Oh, it would be ridiculous.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different techniques. So I have one friend who her technique is she just kind of like, she physically puts up her hand and just is like, okay, no, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
Now for me, that didn't actually work very well.
Okay.
So for me, I had to figure out, like, why does this thing have so much power, and also why is it sticking around? So definitely getting a little dissociated from your inner critic, and, like you're saying, put it out as a second person. And for me, I had to recognize that my inner critic was actually trying to do good things. It was trying to protect me from harms that I had when I was a little kid. It was making me feel more conservative about trying a new thing because I might fail, like all of those kinds of things. But it used really, really crappy language.
Yeah. Harsh, crappy language.
Really harsh, crappy language.
Like, do you have to say it?
I know. I was like, okay. So I kind of sit there and I'm like, okay, I get it. You're worried about me. I understand. You're trying to protect me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please don't use that tone of voice.
Yeah.
You know, which is kind of also the way that that we encounter a lot of people in the world who are trying to actually do something positive, but they just say it in really bad words.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, so if I think about your intention, then I can kind of feel better about you, but I can't listen to your words.
So your big thing is stop, think about what that inner mind is trying to say, or like what the actual good intent is behind it, rather than being like, wow, this is just...
Right, like I just don't take it in literally.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just and then also say, you're reacting to how I was when I was like 8. And I've kind of learned something since then, so
Yeah.
trust me on this one.
Yeah, it's weird how our past, like, severely shapes our decisions now. And
Yeah.
And there was another lesson I learned from another friend where I forgot what it was. I was talking to him about someone else's perspective on something. I'm like, that's so stupid. Like, I don't get why she would look at it like this. It doesn't make any sense at all. And he was like, well, you got to realize, to you, it doesn't make sense because the experiences up to this point led you to realize the obvious. She may not have gone through those experiences to see that. And again, I was like, damn, that's true. And I think it was in, it might have been in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where they give the example of if you saw a father on the train or subway with his kids and they were just running around, just being complete brats, and he was just reading the newspaper, your mind's automatically going to go to, wow, this father's a horrible parent, not good at raising his kids, just letting him run amok. That's ridiculous. And then what if someone told you, oh, the mom had just died the day before and he felt, I just want to let these kids, work out their steam. This is how they're going to do it. You totally rethink the way you see that situation. So I'm trying to be very careful now how I see people if they have, more negative behavior, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That actually is some of the stuff that I try to cover as well, because I feel like a lot of complaining is so self-focused, and I consider it a kind of a monologue, especially since a characteristic of most complaints is that I'm just kind of saying them, like I've got a complaint that I always complain about the traffic, or I always complain about my health, or I always complain about my job, or whatever, and it kind of doesn't matter who I'm talking to. That's the hallmark of like a real complaint, so that's so self-focused. But what if you actually just stepped outside of yourself and thought about the person you're talking with and what they would like to talk to you? Or if you're complaining about another person, take their point of view, like you were giving in that example, and say, oh, what could they possibly have been trying to achieve that was good for them? You know, I'm saying like, how dare they treat me that way? Blah blah blah. They're like, or maybe they have a boss who's really hard about that. You know, it's a super hard line, or they're trying to protect themselves from something. You know, just try to see another point of view, and usually that softens up complaints right away.
Yeah.
And it gives you like, oh, okay, we're humans here. We're all kind of struggling. Everybody's trying to do their best. Got it.
What about like if it's around, because I feel like there's, whether it's certain friends or certain people that might not be, they're not strangers, but they're not close friends, where I can be like, oh, stop it. They're like right in that in between where I feel a little uncomfortable saying like, you should probably stop complaining, or like, you know, like you're trying to help them down, but you don't feel like you're in that position well enough to do it. Is there any?
Yeah. Well, one of the best tips, it was very hard without feeling like a complete ass to just say, you know, you should stop complaining. That generally also doesn't go well.
Nice to be attacked.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't recommend it. What is good though is to say, you know, I have taken a pledge of no complaining, and I'm trying to reduce my own negativity. Right now in this conversation, I'm feeling myself get really negative. So, you know, I'm just going to take a pause and say, you know, I can't have this conversation with you in this tone, or I can't talk about this topic because it's triggering me. And just sort of take it on yourself, because then it's like, oh, all right, half the time that actually makes somebody back up and gives them an awareness of their own complaining, which a lot of people don't have. This, frankly, a ton of people who complain a lot, like I work with chronic and habitual complainers, like unconscious complainers. Well, they're unconscious about it. And so I have worked with some people other people, oh my God, they complain so much. I'm so glad that they're working with you. And at the end, they're like, yeah, I realize I just don't complain very much. You're like, oh my God, you don't have that level of awareness.
How do you get them to realize that, like, wow, they do it way more than they think they're complaining?
Well, one, it's not my job to get somebody else to become more self-aware. And so I think that's one of the things overall, that as humans, you know, that we are not in the job of fixing other people. We are, however, you know, as friends, maybe we want to help somebody else. And so I think one of them is by leading by example. And to say, especially if you do take on a no complaining pledge or any other thing that feels really, really good, and then just say, you know, I've benefited a lot from this. I'd like to bring you on board and show you what I've learned, you know, and I don't know how it can be useful to you, but if it is, then it would be great, and And then hopefully over time they'll realize it. And sometimes just talking about somebody else's negative impact on you, you know, this also, it kind of happened a little bit at work, which was funny because some people joked like, okay, who let the no complaining girl into the meeting? But it means that everybody is now aware, like, right, I'm a living reminder that we want to talk about problem solving. And we don't want to just gripe, and we don't want to just like slam other people that aren't in the room, you know, which erodes trust over a while, you know, for sure. So like sort of that constant, like, I'm living this. And the other one, in terms of protecting yourself, like if it's somebody who's in kind of that environment more frequently, you see them, and you know when you're going to see them, like, especially if it's someplace that you need to protect yourself, you know, for whatever reason, you can declare a NoCo zone. And so I go NoCo for no complaining. So you declare a NoCo zone, whether it's a specific time, or a specific location. Like when I'm driving, this is a no complaints car. You know, setting boundaries, exactly. Or when I get home from work, you know, until the end of dinner time, that's a no complaints time. Because that's like, I need to decompress. And also, especially if you know that a specific target is somebody who always complains about work or always complains about traffic or whatever, and you want to interrupt that pattern, like no-go zone, you know.
I guess I've unintentionally done that same thing with my girlfriend at night, because I noticed her mind must just stew at night. Right as I'm about to pass out, there's always like, why did you do this today? What about this? And I'm like, I don't want to do this right now. I'm trying to go to bed and relax. So like we finally had agreed on like, if it's like, if we're going to bed, that's our NoCo zone. It's save it for the morning, so at least if you are heated, you'll cool down. We can talk about it from a different space, and I just don't want to go to bed stressed either. That's like my line of.
Well, you also want to have enough energy to actually deal with it, you know. So that's a hard one because your mind is spinning and all of that. And you know, if you are in a, you know, like I really am so wound up about whatever, I'm a big fan of writing that stuff down.
Okay.
And just saying like, okay.
Like a free write?
Just a free write. Just like get it all out, use completely whatever language is in your head, don't edit it, just like it's not for showing, it's just for getting it out.
Yeah.
And often that's what you really need is just to release it somehow. And it's not necessarily releasing it to another person is a good idea because, you know, kind of need to process through those, you know, we've all done the angry email that we delete. It's a little bit like that. You got to get the first round out.
Oh, for sure. And let yourself, like you were saying, get it out and see it from another space.
Yeah.
I did that free writing once and I had no intention of it. It was at the time I was debating between 2 jobs. I thought I could find something wrong and right with both jobs, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, I'll just try this free writing thing. Did not believe in it at all. And it was good. Like once I wrote it, I just stopped thinking about it. All the stuff that was stressing me out, it was like there. If I want to reference it, go back to this page, but it's out of my head. And it felt so much better to do that.
Yeah. Years ago, I was doing the morning pages from The Artist's Way, and so every morning, get up, got my coffee, write 3 pages, and the whole idea is that you just write whatever is coming to mind, and the goal is your pen just never stops moving. And it is much better on a pen and paper than in typing, just because like that there's something about that kinetic energy that actually really helps. But what was interesting to me is I'm writing, and okay, fine, just get it out. Like this is the crappy morning feelings that after a while, I noticed, I'm writing the same complaint about myself and my life over and over again in multiple entries over several months. And after a while, I was like, all right, are you going to do something about that or what? Or you need to stop complaining about it. You have 2 choices. I'm going to continue to complain about it and do nothing about it is a completely powerless stance. So if you want to both feel personal power and actually have it, you need to just say, right, I have a choice here. I could stop worrying about it so much, or I can actually take steps to make a change. Is
there anything right now that's like the biggest complaint you're working on bringing down?
Yeah, it is actually. The book launch is very exhausting, and I am still working full-time in actually a more than full-time job. And I have been screwing things up on the book, especially around publishing it and trying to learn self-publishing at the same time as actually getting it out there.
I imagine that's hard.
Yeah, and it's so I got the ebook out, which is great, and it felt awesome. Like the writing part was fantastic and difficult, but understandable. I think I didn't quite expect the level of confusion I was going to experience around all of the different choices on how to get a print edition of the book out.
Okay.
And especially, I would like to get it out into bookstores.
Yeah.
So there's a whole mechanism world about what that is.
Reaching out and
absolutely. And for me, the confusion around, okay, which publishing house do I use, and how do I get an ISBN number and a Library of Congress number so that I can get registered properly, and so that I can get into these proper distribution channels, and like what are the percentages of the wholesale price and this and that, like what's the final selling price going to be, and the print edition. I need to order proofs because I really want it to be quality, and so like how do I choose which quality and all that kind of.
Hear every excuse for every one of those levels.
Totally. And so the biggest thing I'm trying to work on is to not let myself get so anxious that then I just get stupider. And now I'm making really bad decisions, and I'm exhausted, and most of the time I'm doing this in the morning or at night, around my job, and it was just okay. Again, right now the inner critic's pretty harsh, and is like, you should figure this out. I thought you were smart, I
thought you were harder to work with than this. I guess this doesn't mean much to you.
No, Well, I guess you really should be devoted. Are you going to be an author or what? Are you
you
giving enough time?
The whole point of this was to get the book out, and now you're just, because of a couple steps, you don't want to do it.
Yeah, you're really disappointing people right now. There's a lot of people that don't want the ebook. They just want the print copy, and you've been delaying it because it's not in their hands yet.
It's crushing me inside.
It's horrible. So that's the biggest one that I have to pause.
When you're at that peak of just caving in on yourself, what is the first thing you do to just get out of that?
Well, one of the things that I have a group of women that we have been meeting quarterly for the last several years, and called the Goals Group. And so there's 6 of us, and now we have a whole Slack that we work on together. And when I was in the most extreme, I screwed everything up. I hopped onto the Slack, and we have a channel called Hotline.
Okay.
And it's if anybody posts in Hotline, it's okay, you get an alert.
Oh, wow.
On your phone. And
that's
so
such a good idea.
Yeah, and so it's okay, we know each other and what's going on, and I posted in the Hotline, and I was help me. And one of my friends, she wrote immediately, and then she's calling you, and then she called me, and then she's you're doing so much. You are doing a good job. It's not going the way that you wanted it to. It's also not the end of the world. And I was right. So I just had to talk my energy level down. And I mean, this thing has, because there's so many rounds of it, I also leaned on my boyfriend in the same way, where I was oh, I can't handle this. And all he's shh. Just, I feel that's my thing, is I need to externalize my inner critic.
Okay.
Because I can't, when I'm in that fury, I can't talk myself down, So if I can catch the critic a little earlier, that's when I can do that. Okay, yeah, totally not cool language. I get what you're doing. But when I'm already all hyped up like that, I've definitely found that I need to reach out, which is very difficult for me. I was raised in a very not emotionally expressive house. And I'm also a nerdy logic girl, so these things are not all sides.
Emotion, and this makes no logical sense.
Absolutely, so. and also and then there's the you're being such a girl right now. Oh God, it's horrible. And so for me to learn how to ask for help, or to just say I'm going to reveal how completely screwed up I am right now. Is very hard, and what I really started to understand is that I'm allowing my friends to be friends, and when I invite people in and actually show vulnerability in the moment, when I'm not able to just package it up and look how vulnerable I am in a way that feels acceptable to me, then that's when we can get real connection.
Okay.
And so, for any of your listeners who are in that, oh, I never asked for help, I'm well, then you're not actually connecting to people. And people like to help.
Yeah. Yeah, we're tribe mentality.
We are tribal mentality. Yeah. We're a pack animal. We want to create communities. And there's none of us, we wouldn't have made it off of the, savannah or the tundra if we were all super self-reliant. There's no way.
So definitely having just that small support group of people you can trust and be vulnerable to and open up to, that's huge. Yeah. What if even they're just well, I don't, like you were saying, what if they hear that and they're just well, I don't have anyone I can trust. I couldn't do that. I'm not going to let people hear about what's going on.
Well, I think you need to do it in small doses and in ways that feel safe to you, And Brene talks about this. We're both Brene Brown fans, but she talks about the thing that's crazy is this feeling of shame, and how much in that deep moment of beating myself up, I'm ashamed for anybody to see it, because they'll see just how screwed up I am and all of that. And if you can start to create those foundations before you get to that state, and actually let people in on a little bit, just tell them that you're worried about something, or that you're concerned about it. That's a good way to practice. The other thing for me was to think a lot about leadership, and a very strong form of leadership actually invites people into the community, and it's not dictatorial. So I never want to be a dictatorial leader, and a good part of that is to show that you're thinking about something, that you're taking in multiple sides and not just like, I'm going to tell you my decision at the end. You know, we're like, oh, I'd actually like to hear from you. I'd like to show, and actually a form of vulnerability that we don't think about as vulnerability because it's not as emotionally charged, but you're still showing that you don't know everything. And I feel like that's a really good way to practice and also get much better information. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, what about in relationships, people with significant others? What have you noticed is like a big complaint among partners?
One of the hardest things is when one person is complaining about something a lot and the other person is in the position of having to listen to that over and over again. So again, with the idea that complaining is you're supposed to be solving a problem or contributing to at least taking some steps towards that, and also that it's really self-focused monologue. If you're in a relationship, the assumption is that the person who's listening cares about the person who's complaining.
Yeah.
You know, we hope so,
we
right?
Please,
that's like,
oh,
absolutely. So they care. So that means they are empathetic to you. So the definition of empathy is that you're feeling with somebody, not feeling for. That's sympathy. That's like coming down from above. So empathy, you're feeling with. So that means if you're suffering, which you're doing because you're complaining, they're feeling that suffering with you. Now, they try to offer some help for you because they don't want you to suffer because chances are they love you.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to suffer, but then you back their hand away and you're like, I don't want to stop complaining. I am not taking any steps to end the source of my complaints. Well, if you do that again and again, the person who's listening kind of only has two choices. One is they start colluding with you, and so they start complaining and they suffer, they continue to suffer. Or they have to close their heart a little bit and just care about you a little bit less. And that to me is actually one of the main motivators for me to do this work, is watching these long-term relationships that get eroded over time because it's so exhausting to listen to somebody complain about the same thing again and again without trying to solve it. You know, and it's certainly present in a lot of long-term romantic relationships, but I've also seen it in sibling relationships and relationships with parents and coworkers. Like, I just can't listen to that person, so I don't want them to come to dinner, or I don't want to take a vacation with them anymore. I don't want to I don't want to call them anymore. You know, that it just goes over time, and then they start complaining more because like you're not calling now, and they feel isolated, and it just turns into all kinds of badness.
Is there any like studies that show how the complaining works against people in relationships, or in any type of exchange?
Yeah, there's a lot of really strong, especially neuroscience, about the attention bias. So whatever we're putting our attention on becomes more present in the world. And it basically, this idea that you craft your brain based on what you're talking about and what you're paying attention to. And actually when you verbalize something, then you're also making it much more vivid, so you're more likely to recall that as something that is true in the world. If you complain a lot, you're making those things, which are maybe even very small things, way more important as a result of talking about them than all of the other things that you're not talking about. Over time, you start to think that those are the only things in the world.
Oh, man.
And then now your world looks bleak and negative and horrible, which contributes to stress, which raises, you're raising your cortisol levels. It contributes to heart disease. It contributes to anxiety. And it actually can kind of grease the rails if you're prone to depression. It's a good way to actually accelerate that process. Yeah, so it's a really bad deal. And all of that stuff is super documented. Yeah. There's no specific studies about complaining per se, but when I break down the actions of complaining into a lot of things, especially it's called rumination, which is where you're talking over and over and over again about a problem and just kind of in a loop about it, then that has been extremely well studied for decades, and it's one of the more damaging things that we can do to ourselves, and it's also really hard to get out of it. So it's you have to like make a conscious effort. So that's one of the most solid scientific studies.
Okay.
There's also other things, in terms of in relationships. John Gottman's work on bids, where you're talking to your partner and you're trying to put out a bid for attention, and how that person responds is actually very key to telling how long that relationship is going to last. And so the positive negative sort of ratio is, if you're saying a negative thing, you should at the very minimum be saying 3 positive things.
I've heard of this.
Yeah.
Yes, and MIT I think just did a study where if you say one negative thing or something like that, or if someone says one negative thing to you, you need to hear 17 positive things just to fully get over that one negative thing. So yeah,
Right.
I've heard this. And
Right.
I was like,
it's a
oh,
very, very low minimum. And if you're actually saying a negative thing that somebody feels bad already about themselves, then it's, then you need to say 700 things, because that's all you're going to focus on.
Yeah.
I think we as people generally are so attuned to all of the signals that we're going to get kicked out of the tribe, that if somebody complains about you, about something that you are afraid that you get judged on, now it's like, I'm going to get kicked out of the tribe. Now they could have wrapped it in like, oh, you were so great and I love this and I love this, but I don't know if you should have done that. But everything else was great. You just don't hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you spend all that energy. The way I saw it is you spend all this energy trying to fit in and put on this mask of just like, oh, I don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. So I see they all behave a certain type of way, so I'm not going to be myself. I'm going to be that.
Right.
But no matter what, whether you're yourself or someone else, there's going to be a percentage of people that enjoy your company that probably don't mind it or don't care for it. So if you're going to have that discrepancy no matter what, why waste all that energy trying to be someone else when you can just be yourself? You're still going to get people who are like, at least then the people who love you are just like, wow, they like me for me versus this persona I've got put up. Jim Carrey, I don't know if you saw his documentary on Netflix.
Oh, the one about being Andy?
Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
So he drops like nuggets of just like him as an actor and going method like that. And he had some good lines. Let me see if I can pull it up. I saved it. He had so many good quotes from that, and let me see if I can find the one that. So the one he said was, at some point when you create yourself to make it, you're gonna have to either let that creation go and take a chance on being loved or hated for who you really are, or you're gonna have to kill who you really are and fall into your grave grasping into a character you never were.
Oh wow.
Which like encompassed what we were talking about, and I was like, oh man, he sees it. So
yeah, it's hard to reveal yourself because you feel like, yes, I totally agree with that. And I also understand the struggle to reveal yourself, because if you do that and you get rejected, well then what?
Oh yeah, you feel.
But I think your point is absolutely true. There's always going to be somebody who rejects you, no matter what. You could be the best person in the world and somebody doesn't like you.
Yeah.
I have I worked in theater for a really long time, and there's this one playwright who told me this thing one time that I've always held, and he's a brilliant playwright, and he said, I want to write plays where somebody always leaves and somebody always does a standing ovation.
Okay.
The worst thing in the world for me is a life of polite applause. This idea that, it's really great. If you want to put yourself out there, put your work, put your heart, your whatever, your creation out there, whether it's a business or your family or artwork or whatever, and people receive it and then they start applauding, and while they're applauding, they're like, so where'd you like to go for dinner? They're like not even engaged.
Yeah.
That's,
you don't want that.
You don't
There's
want
nothing
that.
for you.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. People, especially anyone who's trying to build a following, whether it's through podcasting or a book or whatever, it's so easy, especially to get wrapped up in like the likes and I just want more followers. But if they're all just polite applauses, quote unquote, of just people that just, I'll follow them because this person looks good or whatever, but there's actually no engagement, then it's useless. You're better off having only 10 people following you, but they're all super talkative and love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing when people talk about what they're doing and they tell the stories later about like how well they're doing, the ones that really get their heart are somebody wrote to me that I really affected them, and this is the story that they told me about the change that happened, or the inspirational moment, or like the quote that you just pulled up, like, oh, this I can really engage with this quote. This makes me think in a way about myself. And it's not like, oh, I feel really great because I got 20 more likes than yesterday. Like that just doesn't last, and that's not a story.
Yeah.
So
that's not what you want to be talking about on your deathbed.
No.
That's how many likes you got.
No.
Yeah. That's funny. What about with? So we were saying how it's our history, like what happened through childhood, that kind of shapes who we become. So with that moving forward, to kind of help that along for people if they have kids or are going to have kids, how can they as a parent kind of, whether they're a father or a mother, shape that with their kids to make sure, like, obviously they're always going to go through something, but how do I give them like a open environment?
One of the more powerful things is for the parents to model the behavior. So, I mean, we talk about this. It's sort of obvious, but it's easy to forget.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen many parents complaining about their kids' amount of screen time while they're talking to me with their phone in their hand. And I'm like, really? You know, and also parents who talk about their complaining children. And, you know, they're complaining to me about their complaining children.
So kids only, they do what they see, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that is really powerful is to do NoCo zones in the house.
Okay.
And it's very straightforward. And then you get to these conversations about, is that a complaint? Or, okay, so that was a complaint. How would you solve the problem? And just start engaging that way. And just constantly put yourself into, you know, what are you going to do about it? Or would you like some help thinking through it? You know, so sometimes it's very challenging to say, so what are you going to do about it? What's your solution? It's like, I don't have a solution. I hate this. And instead it's say, okay, would you like some help thinking about that? You know, do you have a solution? If not, maybe we can strategize something. And that's actually a really good thing. And that's kind of a good thing to do in general. If you're a manager, if you're in a relationship, if you're, you know, whatever, just with friends, it's like, oh, rather than assuming that somebody wants help or assuming that you actually could help them, because maybe that's also not true.
Yeah.
You know, but you might just be a sounding board or something like that.
It's funny how talking it out is sometimes the simplest and best solution. Because people just get, especially guys, I know guys definitely get uncomfortable with talking their feelings out or that kind of thing.
For really like guys, like one of the things that I hear a lot about is this like, but I'm a solutions-oriented guy. Like, you know, like, what do you mean just we're going to talk about feelings? What the hell? Like, that's not, you know, it's so exhausting.
Yeah.
And the little mental trick that is useful is to say, in this situation, the problem to be solved is the emotion.
There you go.
So if you really are a guy who fixes things, fix the emotion.
Yeah.
And take care of that first.
I don't want to. There's no emotion that needs to be involved. What if they just kind of shut down? Like, what are you talking about? It's very logical. We don't need to talk about emotions. You need to just straighten out and.
Right. That, you know, I think, what would it feel like if you were experiencing something and then somebody said that to you? Over and over again, that's one of the best things to do, is to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's on the other receiving end. That perspective, exactly. Can you get outside of yourself and hear yourself? You know, and it's like, oh, I should just straighten it up and just get through it. It's like, well, sometimes that's valid, you know, like when you're an army officer and you've got no time and the bullets are flying and whatever, but most of the time you can take a moment and say, maybe you're trying to be a person here, and I would like to connect with you as a person. You know, and now that I've actually met a lot of people in the military, it's also not true that is not part of being in the military. So when people use that to me as an excuse, I'm like, so no, actually, there's a lot of emotions that are really important to talk about.
Especially at that level, that's all that PTSD and all those struggles.
Absolutely.
They're not raised in an environment where it's like, I need to let people know what's going through my head. If anything, they're taught, going back to what you're saying before, like, I'm just going to keep burying it deeper and grease the wheels for that downward spiral. Right.
And ultimately, it also means that people who are experiencing doubt about something or who have questions about something, they're now in an environment where they know that you're not supposed to question. And other numerous studies have shown that can lead to major safety issues, where somebody doesn't feel right about something, but they're also not willing to say something because historically nobody says anything. You just follow the plan. And then eventually the plan falls apart because that feeling was based on something.
Yeah.
You know, that intuition comes from experience.
Yeah.
And so if you're trusting your experience to tell you that something is off, but the way that it's actually coming to you is, oh, I don't feel right about this. You have to create environments where we can talk about these things. You know, that said, we also don't want to be in environments where we're just constantly talking about our emotions only. And I think that it's easy to kind of get into that universe as well, which is sort of the same thing of, if you're complaining all the time and you're just saying the same thing over and over again, same thing if you're having the same emotion over and over again in the same situation, well, there's something there that isn't right, that needs to either be resolved or walked away from, you know. But constantly going right back into, I'm always feeling this way in this situation, oh, poor me, again and again. Yeah, that's also going to wear somebody out for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yes. I'm a emotion doser. You know, I might be a little bit. Yeah.
No, I like that. I like the balance, because I find, not always, so I don't want to generalize here, but guys aren't emotionful enough. Don't show enough emotion, and girls can go too emotional. So guys can be too logical all the times without letting their feelings out, and girls sometimes get all emotion and don't take a step back and talk through it the way that sometimes it needs to be slowed down.
Yeah, and I think that it's really about sort of social coding, even more than about whether or not we're feeling these emotions. And you know, it's generally more acceptable for women to express it and to not be judged, or to just have that be acceptable. And it's generally more acceptable for men to like stuff it down and you know, stay strong, and not so much to show. But ultimately, I think that that's really toxic on both sides. Oh, sure. And you know, everybody is feeling emotions and has a brain that can solve problems. So, you know. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. When does the book release officially?
So right now you can get it through my website, GoNoCo.com. So GoNoCo. And yes, No Complaints, How to Stop Sabotaging Your Own Joy. So if you go to GoNoCo.com, you can get it. Also, I have a Facebook page, No Complaining Project. And soon, no longer going to put a date on it. Soon, as soon as I settle some ISBN legal issues, we'll be able to order it through any bookstore or Amazon. Awesome. The ebook is already available on Amazon as well. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Before we go, any actionable tip that people can take right now to stop their complaining, to get that 3-to-1 ratio we were talking about, of positivity and negativity, to themselves that they can implement right now?
Yeah, if you catch yourself complaining, the easiest thing to do is to pause. So first, you've caught yourself complaining, so you're already ahead of the game. Now pause for a second and then think about the person who you're talking with, and then ask yourself, is this what they want to be hearing from me right now? Am I making the impression on this person that I want to be right now? And then if I were that person, what would I want to talk about instead? And you can do that really obviously by saying like, oh, I think I was just complaining right now, I'm sorry. Or you can say, wait, you probably don't want to talk about this. How about, you know, we talk about this instead? And actually just become really direct about it. And I think it's weird a little bit because it's not a social norm, but it's a kind of a breaking of social norm that people really welcome. So there's other things that feel weird, and I don't know if we want to do that. But this one is one that's like, oh, people kind of crack up when you call yourself out for complaining. Yeah.
And I'm sure they like the genuineness of that too.
Totally.
Yeah. Cool. And I believe that's, what is it? It's like the lizard brain. You're short-circuiting the lizard brain because that fires just a little quicker than your prefrontal cortex, which is like the logic that says like, wait, this is complaining. That's that self-awareness.
That's exactly right. And especially if you're right in the beginning of this, don't be too hard on yourself, because it's actually very hard to break this habit. Oh, sure. And we're surrounded by a culture of complaint, so it's all around us all the time. So, you know, in this beginning, we have that sort of, there's like an awareness action gap, you know, so I'm now aware that I'm complaining, but I keep complaining and now I'm mad at myself. I'm like, no, just, you know, it takes a while. It took me 3 years before I felt the confidence to tell other people that I had been trying to stop complaining and to feel like, okay, I got a handle on this. You know, it's not going to take, you know, and I was trying to go for some kind of like huge version of it. It's not going to take 3 years, but it'll probably take a couple of months of continuing to screw up and then just saying like, oh, right, I'm complaining again. Oh, when I'm in this environment, I always complain, right? I'm going back to my old habits. So just, you know, say, okay, got it. I'm going to pause for a second. Oh, look at me, I'm complaining again. Sorry.
Okay. One last thing I forgot to ask was, for anyone that's thinking like, oh, this is a little woo-woo and, you know, I don't know if I believe in this, I'm still skeptical. What would be your either tip or piece of feedback for that?
Well, I am not a woo-woo fan, so I come at this from saying I would like to make something that is practical and actionable. As I said, I'm also very nerdy, and so
which is what's great about the book, because if you get the book, there's like worksheets.
There's like it's very
questions,
short.
Which I was telling you before, I love
questions in here.
Yeah, so you can actually, because I was saying like I tab all my books, and I never actually get back to them. Here, it forces you at the end of the chapters to work on yourself and work on what she thinks is very practical. It's not, oh, what is this experiential thing I'm thinking about? It's here's some practical stuff right now.
Yeah, I wanted to take a lot of the years of research and a lot of the dense books that I had been reading and come up with a way of making some access roads into actually living out the lessons in those books. And so that's the goal of this whole thing. It's a workshop in a book form, and you could take it at your own pace. And at the end, I have a starter reading list of the books that are research-based, that are all the ways that you can sort of start to understand the tools that are in here. And it's, of course, it's only a little piece of all of the books I've read, but it's like, if you want to see what the research is, there's your beginning of that as well.
That's perfect. And we'll definitely link all that to the show notes. But there you guys have it, practical stuff. And then if you want to dig into the research that backs it all up, it's all within one book.
That's
so she
exactly
made it very simple and straightforward for us.
Very simple.
So they can't complain that it's hard to access.
That's right.
It's all right there.
You got to complain about something else instead.
So we all need to set our NoCo zones a little more, and 3-to-1 positive to negative, guys. We all easily accept all the negative feedback, which, you know, could even be fine to an extent, but if you're not replacing that with 3 positive things, then you're not helping yourself or anyone else out. So say 3 positive things to every person you meet today.
That's right. And then think about who you're talking to and what do they want to hear.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.